The Ontario housing market is experiencing something we haven't seen since the early 2000s, a complete disconnect between political promises and brutal reality. We're talking about a province-wide crisis that's reshaping how an entire generation thinks about home ownership, rental markets, and their financial future. But here's what nobody's really talking about. While Premier Doug Ford promised 1.5 million new homes by 2031, Ontario managed to build just 94,753 housing starts in 2024. That's 30,000 units short of the 125,000 needed just to stay on track. We're not talking about missing the target by a few percentage points. We're talking about a systematic failure that's costing families their shot at affordable housing. If you're a first-time buyer watching prices stay stubbornly high despite all the policy announcements, if you're an investor trying to figure out why 6,000 Toronto condos are sitting empty while people can't find places to live, or if you're a renter watching your monthly costs eat up 50% or more of your income, this video breaks down exactly what's happening behind the political spin and what it means for your wallet. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel because we're bringing you the real numbers and insider analysis that mainstream media won't tell you about Ontario's housing market. Right, let's get into it. The core problem: numbers don't lie. Look, when I tell people that Ontario built 94,753 housing starts in 2024 while needing 125,000, their first reaction is usually, "That's not too bad, right?" Wrong. Here's the mathematics that'll shock you. At the current pace, Ontario would need until 2039, 8 years past Ford's deadline, to hit that 1.5 million target. But here's where it gets really serious. The population isn't waiting. Ontario adds roughly 300,000 new residents annually through immigration and interprovincial migration. Basic math tells us we need approximately 120,000 to 130,000 new housing units yearly just to keep up with demand, before we even think about addressing the existing shortage. Let me break this down regionally because the disparities are stunning. The Greater Toronto Area, which represents about 47% of Ontario's population, saw housing starts drop to their lowest levels since 2009 in several key months of 2024. Meanwhile, Ottawa recorded a 23% decline in new construction permits compared to 2023. Windsor-Essex? Down 31%. Thunder Bay? Down 28%. But Toronto? This is where the numbers get really wild. The city approved 40,000 new condo units in pre-construction over the past 18 months, yet 6,000 completed units are sitting empty because they were built for investors, not actual residents. The average price per square foot for these investor units? $1,247. The average price per square foot that a typical Toronto family can afford based on median household income of $87,000. About $650. Here's the brutal math. A family earning Toronto's median income can afford a maximum purchase price of roughly $435,000 after accounting for the minimum down payment, land transfer taxes, and carrying costs. The average condo price in October 2024, $742,000. That's a $307,000 gap, or 70% more than what typical families can afford. The rental market tells an even more disturbing story. The average one-bedroom apartment in Toronto now rents for $2,447 per month. Using the standard 30% income rule, you'd need to earn $97,880 annually to afford that rent. That's $10,880 more than Toronto's median household income. For a two-bedroom, you're looking at $3,100 monthly, requiring an income of $124,000. Here's where it gets really serious. These aren't luxury units we're talking about. These are basic housing options that working professionals, teachers, nurses, and skilled trades workers simply cannot afford on their salaries. Now, while everyone's focused on the headline numbers, there's a deeper crisis unfolding that affects 2.3 million Ontario households directly. The really brutal part about all this is that we're creating a two-tier housing system that's locking out an entire generation. Let me show you exactly what I mean with some real calculations. Take Sarah, a 29-year-old teacher in Mississauga earning $65,000 annually. That's actually above the provincial median. She's been saving for 4 years and has $47,000 set aside for a down payment. Sounds responsible, right? Here's her reality. To buy a modest $650,000 condo, which is below the GTA average, she needs $65,000 down, 10% on the portion above $500,000, plus $8,475 in land transfer taxes, plus roughly $3,500 in legal and other closing costs. That's $76,975 just to get the keys. She's $29,975 short before she even considers furniture or emergency funds. But let's say she somehow manages that. Her monthly carrying costs would be approximately $3,847, including mortgage, taxes, maintenance fees, and insurance. That's 71% of her take-home pay. Lenders won't approve her because it exceeds debt service ratios. So Sarah rents. At $2,100 for a one-bedroom, if she can find one, she's spending 51% of her net income on housing. She can't save effectively for a larger down payment because her rent keeps increasing faster than her salary. Multiply Sarah by 847,000. That's the number of Ontario households currently spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs, according to the latest CMHC data. Of these, 312,000 households are spending more than 50% of their income on housing. But here's what makes this fascinating. This crisis is creating massive opportunities for those who understand the system. Institutional investors are buying up entire pre-construction condo buildings. We're talking about real estate investment trusts, REITs, and private equity firms purchasing 200, 500-unit buildings before they're even completed. Why? Because they can afford to let units sit empty for 6 to 12 months while waiting for rental rates to hit their target numbers. A pension fund can absorb $500,000 in lost rental income across 200 units if it means establishing higher rental comps for the entire building. Individual landlords can't do this. The result? We're seeing rental rates artificially inflated in new buildings, which then becomes the benchmark for older buildings in the same area. It's a systematic approach to market manipulation that's perfectly legal but devastating for renters. Here's the really brutal part about all this, is that municipal governments are often complicit. Toronto collected $797 million in development charges in 2024. Mississauga collected $189 million. These charges get passed directly to buyers and renters, but municipalities are addicted to this revenue stream. They have a financial incentive to keep housing expensive. Doug Ford's government has announced policy after policy, but when you dig into the actual implementation, the numbers tell a different story. The $1.6 billion municipal housing infrastructure program sounds impressive until you realize it's spread across 4 years and 444 municipalities. That works out to roughly $900,000 per municipality over 4 years, or $225,000 annually. In Toronto, where a single kilometer of water infrastructure costs $8 to $12 million, this funding covers maybe 200 meters of new water mains. You can't build meaningful housing supply with that level of infrastructure investment. The Building Faster Fund? Ford announced Toronto would receive $114 million for exceeding housing targets. Sounds great, except the targets were set artificially low. Toronto's target was 40,000 new units over 3 years. They hit 4,200. But Toronto actually needs roughly 25,000 new units annually just to keep pace with population growth. That's in 5,000 over 3 years. They're getting rewarded for building 44% less than what's actually needed. Here's where the political math gets interesting. Ford's progressive conservatives won 83 seats in 2022, with particularly strong support in the 905 regions: Mississauga, Brampton, Markham, Richmond Hill. These are exactly the areas where housing affordability determines election outcomes. Internal polling data suggests that 67% of 905 region voters under 40 consider housing affordability their top voting issue. That's 1.2 million potential voters who could swing to any party that offers credible solutions. Ford knows this, which explains the constant stream of housing announcements. But here's what's wild. While Ford announces housing initiatives, his government simultaneously implemented policies that restrict supply. Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act, actually reduced the types of housing that can be built in many areas by restricting missing middle housing like duplexes and triplexes in single-family neighborhoods. The Greenbelt controversy? That wasn't really about environmental protection. It was about maintaining artificial scarcity. There's enough serviced land within existing urban boundaries to build 400,000 housing units tomorrow. The Greenbelt debate was political theater, while the real supply constraints, zoning restrictions, development approval timelines, and NIMBY policies remained unchanged. Now, let's talk about the federal government's role. Justin Trudeau's Liberals have announced the Housing Accelerator Fund, the First-Time Home Buyer Incentive, and various tax measures. Total federal housing spending in Ontario for 2024? $2.1 billion. Sounds significant, until you realize Ontario's housing market is worth approximately $2.8 trillion. We're talking about 0.075% of market value in government intervention. The Bank of Canada's interest rate policy deserves special attention here. When rates dropped from 5% to 4.25% in late 2024, the Liberals claimed victory for housing affordability. But here's the reality. That 0.75% reduction saves a buyer roughly $185 monthly on a $600,000 mortgage. Meanwhile, average housing prices increased by $23,000 over the same period. Buyers are paying $185 less monthly but need $2,300 more upfront for the down payment. But here's what makes this fascinating. While regular families struggle, certain players are making unprecedented profits from this crisis. Let's follow the money. Construction companies working on large-scale developments are seeing gross margins of 28 to 35% compared to the historical average of 18 to 22%. Why? Because housing scarcity allows them to charge premium prices while construction costs haven't increased proportionally. A square foot of residential construction costs roughly $180–220 to build, but sells for $650, $850 in Toronto's core. Real estate investment trusts focused on rental properties have seen share prices increase 23 to 31% in 2024 alone. Canadian Apartment Properties REIT, Car and Tattoo reported funds from operations up 12.4% year over year. Their strategy? Buy older buildings, renovate them minimally, and increase rents by 15 to 25% between tenants. Mortgage brokers and private lenders are experiencing a renaissance. Alternative lending, private mortgages, bridge financing, and non-bank lending has grown by 340% since 2020. Interest rates on private mortgages range from 8 to 14% compared to 5.56% for bank mortgages. The profit margins are enormous. But the biggest winners might surprise you. It's established homeowners in specific postal codes. If you bought in Toronto's M4K, M4L, or M4M postal codes between 2015 to 2018, your home value has increased by an average of $387,000. That's tax-free wealth accumulation of roughly $77,400 annually, more than most people's entire salary. Here's what's wild about this dynamic. These homeowners now have massive home equity lines of credit, HELOCs, they can access at prime rates. They're using this cheap capital to buy investment properties, further reducing supply for first-time buyers. It's a wealth concentration mechanism disguised as a housing market. The renovation industry deserves mention here. Home improvement spending in Ontario hit $14.2 billion in 2024, up 31% from 2019. Why? Because people can't afford to move, so they're investing in their current homes instead. This creates economic activity but doesn't solve the supply problem. Property management companies are seeing explosive growth. Professional property management fees have increased from 4 to 6% of rental income to 8 to 12%, while vacancy rates remain low. They can charge premium fees because landlords are making so much money that management costs are easily absorbed. But here's where it gets really interesting. Some municipalities are becoming investment vehicles themselves. Toronto's Housing Secretariat has partnered with pension funds to develop rental properties. The city provides land at below-market rates. Pension funds provide capital, and they split the returns. It's public-private partnership where the public takes the risk and private partners take the profits. Based on current trajectories and policy announcements, here's what the data suggests will happen over the next 18 to 24 months. Housing starts will likely increase to 105,000 to 110,000 in 2025. Still well below the 125,000 needed. This improvement will come primarily from pre-approved projects finally breaking ground, not from new policy effectiveness. The pipeline takes 18 to 36 months from approval to construction start. Prices will remain sticky downward, but could see 5 to 8% increases in specific submarkets. The Toronto condo market will likely see price compression. Luxury units dropping 3 to 5%, while affordable units increase 4 to 7%. This creates a narrowing price band that still excludes most first-time buyers. Rental markets will see bifurcation. New luxury rentals will experience vacancy increases and rent decreases of 8 to 12%. Older affordable units will see continued rent increases of 15 to 20% annually through renovictions and unit turnovers. Interest rate policy suggests the Bank of Canada will cut rates by another 0.5–0.75% by mid-2025. This will improve affordability by roughly $300–400 monthly on average mortgages, but will likely be offset by price increases as more buyers enter the market. For first-time buyers, focus on emerging neighborhoods 30 to 45 minutes from downtown cores. Look for pre-construction opportunities with 18 to 24-month closing dates, allowing time to save larger down payments. Consider partnerships with family members or friends to combine resources. For current homeowners, if you're planning to sell within 2 to 3 years, list in the spring market of 2025. Inventory will be lower and rate cuts will bring more buyers. If you're staying long-term, consider HELOC strategies for investment or major renovations. For investors, the optimal play is likely small multifamily properties, 2 to 4 units, in secondary markets like Hamilton, Kitchener-Waterloo, or Windsor. Cap rates are 6 to 8% compared to 3 to 4% in Toronto, and there's more room for rent growth. For renters, lock in longer lease terms now if you're in an affordable unit. Rent control laws protect sitting tenants, but not lease renewals. Build credit and savings aggressively. You may have opportunities to buy in 2026–2027 if supply policies finally take effect. The key is understanding that Ontario's housing crisis isn't a temporary market correction. It's a structural transformation that requires different strategies depending on your position. The numbers don't lie, but they also reveal opportunities for those who know where to look. The political pressure will intensify as we approach the 2026 provincial election. Expect more dramatic policy announcements, but watch the implementation timelines carefully. Real change in housing supply takes 3 to 5 years to materialize. Knowing your numbers and being ready to act when the right opportunity comes along.